Before we get into today's video, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed. It's totally free and allows you to never miss one of our videos.
Welcome back, listeners, to Humans Do What? Hopefully, the soon-to-be official best podcast on the Human Trolley Alliance. The place to hear all the news needed to stay up to date with these goofy mammals. I am your host, Speaker Trofar Lore, here to guide my fellow Shralee through the crazy stories and antics our little friends get up to. Now, let's see the results from the Humans Do What poll from last week. For the new listeners out there, this is where I go through your comments and pick out the 3 most frequent viewer questions. I post them, and you vote on which one we do a deep dive on. A bit of a dark horse this time. It started out small, but really picked up in popularity near the end of the week. You have asked, why do humans put trees inside their houses? It was a very, very close win against what is persistence predation. Those voting for who is Jack and why is he in so many human larvae stories will have to work a bit harder to break the top 2, I'm afraid. Keep on casting your votes, and we may see these topics in future episodes. As always, for legal reasons, nothing I say here can be used as medical, judicial, structural, or courting advice. Our longtime sponsor, Greshstrala Biomechatronics, has returned with a shockingly topical product. Are you tired of bringing your cephapod vines inside during the rainy months? Want to rearrange your garden, but the prospect of digging up your bushes and shrubs seems daunting? Well, Greshstrala wants to introduce you to their line of mobile plants. That's right, plants that move where you direct them. Using their proprietary app, you can get your Threnfall fruit trees to meander your property, chasing the sun to get the most out of a growing season. Redecorate your topiary with the push of a button, or even have preset arrangements to match the holiday. I, for one, am glad I'll never have to hang out my Vothian ivy plant for Shanthala's Day ever again. So, if you're looking to make your gardening a breeze, or maybe need a gift for that special bug in your life, take a look at Greshstrala Biomechatronics, where science meets living. Before we get to it, the Vroll System Speaker Awards are coming up in just 2 weeks. I have seen you on Discord, and the outpouring of support has really touched my hearts. To any of my listeners who have yet to, please go to the Speaker Awards Cretin page to vote up my show. Links can be found in the Discord and my home page. Remember, if we win, I'll post a special episode as thanks. The ideas you've put forward have been super interesting. Right now, the frontrunner is getting a human Shralee romantic couple in for an interview. Speaking to the author of the Ms. Rimke novel series is a close second. Keep putting up suggestions, and don't forget to vote. Now, on to the show. As always, simple answer first. Why do humans put trees in their homes? Well, it can be for a variety of reasons. Like the Shralee, humans need plants around to be healthy. Both of our species evolved with our trees as a cornerstone of life, though in different ways. Humans aren't timber-burrowing beetles, obviously. Instead, they're forest-climbing mammals. So, while our early ancestors were chewing through Shoancerasa bark to make our colonies, the humans were making homes among the high branches. That fellowship with plant life followed both of our cultures into our modern civilizations. This is why, on more or less any human colony or ship, they'll have small plants in pots or grow beds inside their structures. Shout out to Professor Seshra Trini and her book, The Kindest Monsters, for this intel. Her book is available now on the Hecthreal University Cretin page. There is, of course, one strange tradition that I think has spurred this particular question in our comment section. See, around this time in the standard year, billions of humans will find a specific kind of tree that stays green, even during their colder seasonal shift. This species isn't transplanted, but cut down. It is then placed in the home, decorated, and surrounded by gifts or offerings. For this episode, I traveled to the Shrali Frontier Patrol Cruiser, Thala Ahara's Grace. This vessel once patrolled the Shrali human border before the Alliance, but is currently in the middle of being refitted for the Craxian warfront. The following are 3 individuals who have had first-hand experience with this human tradition. This is Speaker Trofar Lore from the Humans Do What podcast. I am speaking with Than Kahilfen, the Chief Communications Officer of the Thala Ahara's Grace. Thank you, Than Ka, for agreeing to meet with me. I understand that you must be awfully busy with the retrofit.
Well, when a fellow speaker asks for an interview, who am I to say no? Besides, the captain loves your podcast. She'd have my antennae if I turned you away.
I'm slated to talk to her next, actually. I'll be sure to tell her you are the most accommodating arthropod I've ever met.
Much appreciated. So, if I'm not mistaken, you wanted to know about the humans' holiday tree tradition?
Indeed, I do. So, what can you tell me about this curious practice of theirs, and how did you learn about it?
Well, before I became the Grace's comms officer, I was a liaison to the nearby human colony on Kepler 22b. That system is the de facto border between human and Shrali space, so we've had a dedicated ambassadorial role there since first contact. Up until now, anyway. Not enough resources to go around with the war on, you understand.
Of course. So, as the liaison, I suppose you got a lot of face-to-face time with the humans?
Not as much as one might expect, but certainly more than most, especially in those early years. These days, you can usually find at least one human in more or less every Shrali city. Back when I started that job, I knew possibly 2 people who had met the funny little mammals. Anyway, I'd go down there roughly once or twice a month for about a week or so. They didn't have a true embassy since Kepler is a pretty new colony. They're still getting their first city established, you have to understand. Instead, a human would be assigned to host me for my stay. My chosen living arrangements would change, depending on availability, but I developed a few favorites. For my first trip, the captain who held the liaison position before me suggested a human called Robert Cabling. I had no reason to doubt her guidance, so I met up with Robert on his farm. It certainly didn't look like a farm, though. All the ground was covered in these flakes of frozen water known as snow. I was told the planet was going through an annual cooling cycle of some kind.
The humans call it winter. Apparently, there's quite a divide among their people when it comes to settling worlds, whether a planet is better if it includes this seasonal shift or not.
Well, Robert loved it. He said his father was born in a human territory called Wisconsin, and it's very important there. His own son, a larva of only a few local years old, played in the snow all day long. I didn't care for it myself, but I had a personal thermal field to keep me warm. Robert and his brood wore several layers of cloth to trap the ridiculous amount of heat they generate. On the first day of my visit, we ventured out to get the holiday tree.
Can you explain the purpose of this tree?
A little, I think. While cultural exchange is a pretty big part of my job, I only actually understand so much of it. Robert didn't even really know why they get a tree aside from tradition. His father got the family a tree, his grandfather got the family a tree, and on and on. So, Robert gets one for his family. Still, they enjoy decorating it, and are supposed to put a bunch of gifts under it.
Supposed to?
Yes, well, that first day was delightful. We left, got the tree, and brought it back to decorate. I even held Billy Cabling, Robert's spawn, aloft so he could place this 5-pointed ornament on the tip. He told me it was a noticeable honor. Later that night, though, I found Robert and his mate in the main room. I was getting my 5th meal, but I stopped when I heard them talking. You know, it's been a hard year, he said to his mate. They were quiet, and I don't think they meant for me to hear them. The stipend from housing Thankar helps, but that's just letting us to break even. We're okay, Robbie, she said, rubbing his back. I'll talk to Cousin Earl. His son's a bit older than Billy. Maybe we can pick up a few hand-me-downs, something to fill out the tree. I talked to Earl yesterday. He let out a shuddering breath, clearly not bearing good news. He already gave his son's old toys to the Planter family. They're not doing great either. He can find me a few shifts deconstructing the seed ship, though. It just wouldn't pay out till the new year. No, baby, that's dangerous work, she cried. It would at least let me get Billy something, he said, his shoulder heaving in unrepentant sobs. I don't want him to grow up like we did. Barely enough rations to go around, let alone presents. He won't, she assured. Besides, the holiday isn't about getting toys, Robbie. She pulled him onto her, part embrace, part supporting each other. He's a good kid. He'll understand. I returned to my room without my meal. It felt wrong to interrupt that.
What happened then?
Well, the next day I did my job. Robert drove me into town so I could speak with the settlement leaders and diplomats. I wanted to help him, but Commonwealth credits don't mean much to a frontier colony, and trying to have the human leadership intervene would show favoritism. He'd enjoy a brief reprieve, but then suffer harsh judgment afterwards. When we returned at the end of the day, Robert's hands were bandaged, and he looked very, very tired. Still, he refused to be anything less than jovial with me. At their house, I found Billy playing with the neighbor's boy, the two mothers sitting on the front porch watching the boys frolic in the snow. It was only then that I noticed Billy's coat was too small, his wrists uncovered, and his belly showing when he raised his arms. He was contrasted by his playmate, who was so thoroughly bundled I couldn't see any skin, even on his face. "Commander," Robert said when he got to the porch. The woman he addressed was pale and had a riot of frizzy red hair. She sat out in the cold, wearing only a yellow sundress, a pair of straight scars running down the length of her bare arms. "How's the family? Emmanuel seems pretty lively." Robert motioned back to the two wrestling children. "Family's getting by," she shrugged. "Had to tighten the old belt a bit, but that's going round. Emmanuel has been a ball of sunshine ever since his older sister let slip that she saw Papa wrapping up an easy-bake oven for him. Can't tell that girl a darn thing. Lil Abby spills more beans than an epileptic barista," she sighed. "How are you doing?" The woman gave a pointed look at the bandaged hands, but Robert just waved it off. "Getting by," he said, returning her own words with good cheer. "These boo-boos will all be fixed up by the morning. Heck, where's my head? Commander, this is Thankar. Thankar, this is Commander Splicer, my CO from the old militia days." From there we chatted amiably. They had a poison known as heated cocoa, while I enjoyed a cup of silobin tea. Eventually, Robert and his mate went inside to prepare their evening meal, Billy coming in shortly after. "We ought to get going too," Commander Splicer said, getting up just in time to catch her son, who came running up. "Mama," he said, voice muffled through what had to be 5 scarves. "Billy told me his mama doesn't think Santa's gonna visit him." "Oh?" she asked, walking down the walk, child on her hip. "Can we ask Santa to give some of my gifts to Billy?" he asked before they got too far away for me to hear. I didn't know who this Santa figure was, but the child was very sweet to offer such a thing.
"I've heard of Santa. He's supposed to bring human children presents during their midwinter festival."
"I'm fairly certain Santa is a female, actually."
"Oh?"
"Yes, you see, later that week, I woke up for 6th meal. When I came down for my mulch cake, I saw her, a human female, clad in a red coat with white trim. She was placing the last of nearly 24 boxes under the tree. The only light was coming from the glow of the tree itself, so her features were indistinct. I don't know how, but she sensed me watching her and looked up. She put one of her fingers in front of her mouth like this.
Ah, that's a human sign to request silence. I think it's called a shush.
Well, she shushed at me, then vanished.
Did you alert Robert?
No. Honestly, at the time, I thought I was just overtired and seeing things. It wasn't until morning that I realized it had been real, not some half-dream. The whole family came out to find the tree packed with items, boxes and bags, some nearly as big as Billy. The young boy tore into the nearest gift with vigor, while Robert struggled to comprehend what had happened. "It's an easy-bake oven!" Billy cried with glee, holding up a box with a small cooking device on the front. Robert started crying then. He said they were happy tears when I asked after his health. We spent the rest of the morning sorting and opening the gifts. To my surprise, some of them were addressed to me. While I will admit a certain amount of excitement at receiving a whole carafe of maple syrup, it was more, I don't know, beautiful to see how delighted Billy was, and how that joy reflected in the eyes of his parents. I realized it wasn't about presents or the tree, but the family seeing each other happy. From then until my retirement from the position, I made it a point to visit them for the winter holiday, bringing along gifts of my own. This will be the first time in nearly 15 years that I'll miss it.
I'm sorry, Thanka. It sounds like the cabling brood means a lot to you.
They do. Billy is 20 now. He's going to join the Terran Defense League this year. I gave him a letter of reference for the Officers' Academy. Hopefully, that won't be the last gift I give him.
Agreed, and thank you for such a loving story.
No, thank you for the glowing report you'll no doubt give to my captain.
Ha! My pleasure. This is Speaker Trofar Lore from the Humans Do What podcast. I am speaking with Hail Thon Felah, venerated captain of the Thal Aharaz Grace. I must express my sincere appreciation for allowing me on your vessel, let alone sharing a story with me. My dear speaker, telling you my tale is the whole reason I bent over backwards to get you on my ship. I had all of my crew in your comment section to vote up this topic. Oh my, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Go with flattered. You just had a queen cast lean her not inconsiderable influence into having a meeting with you. Flattered it is then. I must ask though, why? What? An age-ripened queen cast can't be a fan? Well, my audience does skew to younger Shra-Lee, not to say that you're old, ma'am. Oh, hush, I'm just messing with you. While I am a fan, I also wanted to tell you about my time with the humans, how they can be kind in the absolute weirdest ways. This story in particular, I feel is important given the current political climate. About the humans' tree ritual? Indeed, such a curious tradition. As Thanka might have mentioned, before he took up the role, I was the diplomatic liaison to the human colony on Kepler 22b. What he may not have mentioned was that for a small portion of my career, it was a joint colony. Oh, I had no idea that Shra-Lee ever set a claim on Kepler 22b. Too much water and no tropical forest zones. Too true, but I never said it was a joint colony with the Shra-Lee. About 2 decades after the human seed ship landed, a Craxian world-eater pike challenged for rights to the planet. Oh no! The humans must have managed to fend them off if their colony is still standing. You must remember, the humans aren't Shra-Lee. We have always had a touchy relationship with the big lizards. The humans, they formed more treaties with those massive reptiles in a scant handful of decades than our people have throughout the last 3 centuries. So, instead of a fight, they held on to this quiet, abiding truce of sorts. One of my delegatory trips coincided with a treaty renegotiation between the 2 colonies. Being the curious young queen that I was, I asked if I could tag along. My host was a man named Albert Cabling, and his oldest son, Robert, was in the colony militia. He was assigned to me as personal security. We traveled with the rest of his squad and a few human delegates in a caravan stacked with trade goods. The meeting spot was a massive terraforming pine grown at a clearing between the human and Craxian territories. It was dark, but fires had been set around the space, and the snow swept away. It was warm even without my thermal field. We were met with a matching group of Craxian purgers and their equivalent to politicians. "Howdy, Cranthak," the lead human said. I think his name was Smith, but so many of them are named that. "Niceties first, Human Smith," the massive reptile replied. "Mustn't venture from tradition." "Wouldn't dream of it." Smith turned back to the squad, looking at one in head-to-toe red armor. "Commander, would you be kind enough to represent us in this initial step of negotiation?" "Sir," crackled an electronic voice as the warrior stepped up, motions crisp and confident. A mind-bogglingly huge Craxian squared off against the human champion. I knew of this tradition, but it was rarely practiced in Shrali Craxian talks. That the squishy little humans would bother trying to physically fight for a better standing in the negotiation came as a genuine surprise. I found humans to have a very stubborn mentality about fights, especially their warrior castes. This tradition wasn't to the death, was it? Did the human champion survive? Oh, they did more than survive. When the battle started, the human practically vanished. They actually just moved so fast that they were on top of the Craxian before I could process it. It turns out this little colony had one of the vaunted super soldiers the humans are fond of making. Between the armor and surgical augmentations, the fight was almost farcical. The Craxian brute gnashed with its toothy snout, lashed out with claws, even tried to use its scaled tail as a cudgel. The human danced, letting claws rip through the ground, teeth snap around empty air. It was really quite the sight to behold, watching the Craxian flail about, chasing after the wily soldier. That fight came to an end when the Craxian had herded the human to put their back to the large tree. The beast swept down with its clawed hands, trying to box in its quarry. Instead of scurrying out of the way, outstretched arms caught the pair of blows, stopping them cold. By merely tightening their grip, the human brought the battle to a close with howls of pain and the grinding of wrist bones. Delegate Smith gave their champion a curious look as they marched back to the cluster of soldiers. "You usually put on more of a show," he said, a question in his tone. The human removed her helmet, revealing short, curly red hair and a stern face. "Apologies, sir." She hooked a thumb back at the tree. "He were about to hurt the centennial tree. I figured it best to put a stop to any possible accident." "Centennial tree?" "Apparently that tree was planted specifically to be used on the 100th anniversary of the colony's founding. Anyway, having won the physical part of the meeting, the humans had first rights to a number of treaty items. That was evidently untenable to the Craxians. "There will be no negotiations," their delegate Cranthak stated. "We needed to win the opening move this day. Without that edge, we don't have the supplies to last the winter." Looking closer, I saw how skinny a lot of the Craxians seemed. Even their massive warrior was leaner than some of the purgers I'd met in my time. "What are you saying?" asked Smith. "We're leaving Kepler," Kranthack snarled. "It's too cold, not enough hunting. At this point, we might not have the resources to return to Craxi Prime. We delayed this long gambling that you'd leave your monster at home." He cast a glare at the red-haired human, who glared back. "Now we have to launch tonight just to have a chance." "I can't say I'm sorry to see you go, Kranthack," Smith said with a smirk. "You ate a lot of our livestock over the years. All right, Commander, pack it up. Get your troops back on the bus." "No, sir," the commander shouted. "Pardon?" Smith asked, a strange mix of confusion and anger in his voice. "Boys, unload that there cargo. Set it under the tree," she said, directing the waiting soldiers. "I want to see a chain. Faster you get done, faster you get to the mess for some moose milk. Also, before you ask, I have no idea what moose milk is. Something to do with alcohol in unsettling quantities." Anyway, at her words, the surrounding soldiers hopped to work. Smith protested, telling them to return the trade goods. They were worth thousands of credits, etc. He stopped when the commander grabbed him by the front of his shirt and picked him up off the ground. "You're spoiling the holiday cheer, sir," she said with a chill in her voice that put the cold air to shame. "Or maybe you don't think these fine folks deserve a Yuletide parting gift." Thankfully, Smith had the wisdom to stay quiet and was more or less stuffed into one of the vehicles. "Oh my, did you protest? That's technically giving aid to the enemy." "We weren't at war then, remember?" From there, we watched the Craxians process what in Farahar's name was going on and eventually start shuffling the new cargo onto their ships. The squad stuck around to make sure that they actually left, which only took a couple of hours. Apparently, they didn't expect to win that gamble and had pretty much everything packed up. The next day, as punishment for her holiday mutiny, the commander and her squad were told to comb through the entire Craxian colony. They had to report any possible resources of value, check for spies left behind, sabotage devices, and other stuff. Anything to keep them out in the cold for the whole day. I asked little Robert about it later. "That was the most miserable 23-hour shift I've ever pulled," he reported, warming numbed fingers around a cup of tea. "Your commander should be punished, not you," I said, seeing the treatment as unfair. "Nah," he waved my indignation away. "The commander was right. None of us would be able to sleep sound knowing we sent those folks into space to die. Besides, they got into the holiday spirit too." He reached over to a small Craxian cargo box, pulling out a gray glass bottle the size of his head. "They left us a thank you. All of us got a little something." "Oh?" I asked, reeling back from the pungent smell from the bottle. "What did your commander get?" Despite his assurances, I was still sore on his behalf. "She got the egg," he replied simply. "The egg?" He didn't elaborate, and I didn't pry since he needed to retire to bed. Still, it's clear that giving is at the heart of this tree tradition. The humans put thousands of credits worth of supplies under that tree. They assumed they wouldn't get anything back, a tradition eagerly practiced even with their colony rivals without hesitation. "How bizarre. Thank you very much, Captain. That was quite insightful." "My pleasure. Now, I had an idea or two for some follow-up episodes. Kepler is mostly ocean, you know, and there's a huge aquaculture industry there you could... Oh my, look at the time. I have to get to my next interview. Thank you again, Captain." This is Speaker Trofar Lore from the Humans Do What podcast. I have Denvo Ranthal with me to discuss the human tree ritual. Denvo, you were actually stationed on a human vessel up until a week ago, correct?
That's correct, Speaker, ma'am. I was a junior engineer on the UTIC Maxwell's Demon as part of an exchange program.
Speaker or just Trofa is fine, Denvo. So, living on a human ship, you must be an absolute treasure trove of insights on human culture.
Haha, you'd think so, but on commissioned ships, there's only really one culture, and that's the military one. It's mostly about getting up on time, doing what you're told, jokes about mating, and alcohol. Just so much alcohol.
Does that mean you don't have information about their winter tree festival?
Oh, no. I want to tell you everything about that. See, on the ship, I worked pretty closely with this human, Abigail Splicer. She was picked to be sorry, the translation doesn't work well for the military term.
Don't worry, our Discord actually has an evolving dictionary of human slang. I'm sure we have a listener eagerly waiting to jot this down.
Okay, I was to be her newfie trailer, which basically means I'd be following her around. A little example of that military culture for you. She got picked because she winced the most when the job came up.
That seems unfair.
These are people who will walk into a room, ask who wants ice cream, and assign latrine duty to anybody who puts up their hands. I think the point is to train them to be stoic about surprises or something. Eventually, we started getting along. Abby really helped with teaching me, ordering me aid equipment so I could see their screens better or type on their keyboards. We spent the most of a year together like that.
Sounds like you two were growing pretty close.
Well, yes, she was my first human friend. Oh, you mean? No, Abby's married. Yeah, her wife helps on the family farm on Kepler, while Abby's on the Maxwell's Demon. That's actually where we went for the holiday vacation time.
That wasn't an intrusion?
You'd think so. When she heard my exchange program was up soon, though, she dragged me to the lead engineer's office. Sir, Denny's time's up in a month, she said, standing at attention in the office doorway. I am aware, Second Lieutenant. This matters how? He asked, not looking up from his papers. He's not living without visiting the family, she said matter-of-factly. I'm on my holiday leave, start and end of shift. Permission to show our giant-ass bug a holly jolly time, sir. Will there be decked halls and stockings hung with care? He asked, seeming to consider the request with all due seriousness. Yes, sir, Abby reported. Very well. The chief engineer stood looking at the pair of us. Second Lieutenant Splicer, as you will be representing humanity in this endeavor, I order you to present Civilian Rep Denvo with the single merriest display of Yuletide cheer at your disposal. Is that clear? He asked. At her crisp nod, he sat back down to return to his paperwork. Excellent. You are dismissed, and happy holidays.
They took that rather seriously.
The chief engineer has something called a poker face, where he refuses to show emotions like other humans. Most of that was a joke that had Abby cackling the entire walk to the shuttle. The shuttle brought us and a handful of other Kepler natives down for the holiday. Cassandra, Abby's wife, met us at the landing port and drove us out. Along the way, Abby warned me about some things surrounding the tree ritual. We're doing this at my mama's place, she told me. Cassandra visibly shuddered, but made no comment. Oh, shush you! So, warning one. You will eat too much, and it will hurt a little. If my mom thinks you're trying to pace yourself, she'll personally shovel sweet potato mash into your face. It's easier just to let it happen, Cassandra confirmed. Warning two, Abby continued. You're gonna be treated like a member of the family. You are expected to return that gesture. Be nice, basically. Leave the military jokes on the ship. They don't fly so good in Civiland. Lastly is my brother. What's up with your brother? Cassandra asked. He's like the sweetest person I ever met. What about me? Abby asked, indignant at the remark. You're about as sweet as a black cup of coffee, Cassandra countered. Keep me up all night like one too, so I overlooked that first bit. Abby blushed a bunch at that for some reason. I didn't ask, and Abby apparently forgot to go into the details as to why I should be warned about her brother.
Did you ever find out?
Yup. We got to the farm all right and went inside. It was a very busy affair. The main room had the tree set at its center, the roof having been modified to allow for the very, very large plant. It was decorated with lights, shiny baubles, pictures of the family, cards, popcorn, and a star at the very top. Under the boughs were stacked boxes, bags, and packages of all description. It was a very impressive sight to behold. Milling about were a dozen or so humans. Apparently, the matron of the house, who everyone just called Mama or Commander in roughly equal measure, had invited a couple families to the event. This red-haired human came bustling over and shoved a cup of Silobend tea into my hands before saying a word. "Y'all must be Abby's friend," she said, turning to pull Abby and her wife into a spine-shifting hug. "Ooh, I don't see you two often enough. Come down from the ship more." She released them before looking Abby up and down. "Ugh, go to your room, young lady, out of those fatigues. It's Yule, not an invasion. Emmanuel can look after your friend till you get back. Emmanuel, leave Billy alone and get your tail in here." "Oh shit," Abby said, realizing she'd blanked on my warning. "Dude, be cool and don't mention Craxians." "Why would I began, but stopped when the largest Craxian purger I'd ever seen sauntered into the room from the kitchen.
What did you do?
I nearly fell backwards in my rush to run out of the house. It wasn't until I was in the front yard that I realized I had no way of getting back to the shuttle. I was trying to figure out if I could fight, but I'm a scholar caste, not a warrior. Then the beast came out after me. He was over 3 meters tall and had to be 800 kilos. I did actually fall over this time, instinctively curling up into a defensive ball.
How'd you survive?
He just sat next to me instead of eating me. "Hey there," he said, knocking gently on my carapace. "I get that I'm a bit spooky looking, but I won't hurt you none, promise." He said that so calm and gentle I nearly forgot it came out of a Craxian maw. You know, when Mama said Abby were bringing home one of them Shrali folk, I were right excited. I don't get to be the second weirdest person around too often, he chuckled, then hurriedly added, "Not that I think you're weird or nothin'. Sorry, I blabber when I get nervous." He sounded genuinely apologetic. Nervous? This massive death machine was nervous. "Why don't you get on inside, though? It's pretty cold out here, and if we stay out much longer, I'm gonna have to bundle up a heck of a lot more than just a sweater." I peeked an eye out to see that he was, in fact, wearing a large sweater stretched across his scales. It read, "Mistletoe Tester," in comically large letters over the chest. "Hey, little bro, you go inside and warm up," Abby said, coming up to us. She still had on her fatigue pants, but with her own sweater on too. "I'll help Denny unspool." "All right, Abby," he said, heading inside. "But put some hustle in your bustle. I'm just about to take the sweet potato mash out. If you don't get any, it's your own fault." "Hey, buddy," Abby said, sitting down next to me. "So, as you might have guessed, my brother's adopted." "Adopted? He's a Craxian," I hissed, unfurling a little to glare at Abby. "Shh! Geez, he doesn't know," she said back in a whisper, looking at the door. "Heck, I didn't even know until I joined the Defense League. Imagine my shock when there's a whole damn species what looked like my baby brother." "How?" is all I could think to ask. "Mama raised him right," Abby shrugged. "She calls him her Yuletide miracle." "But I started. "He's my family." Her voice left no room to argue. "And for the rest of the holiday, he's your family too. That's what this whole darn thing is about. Acceptance, family, and love. Think you can swing that, or should I bring you back to the shuttle?" she asked, no judgment, just hope and concern. I think I'd like some of that sweet potato mash," I said. She smiled, and we headed inside. From there, I did indeed have a holly jolly time, surrounded by the most caring family I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of.
I hope you enjoyed that story. Click right here to watch another video with the same characters.